Hi, today we're going to be needle felting a fox. We're going to take two wires, two of the green wires in your kit. We're going to twist them together. But what I like to do is form a loop first. And I know it's kind of off the screen. Form a loop and then I start to twist them so that it's easier to twist and they don't just immediately fall apart. And you're going to twist until you hit 6 centimeters. So it's going to be 2 centimeters for the head and then 4 centimeters for the neck. So you bend that into an L shape. And then you're going to split the two wires. And it should be 2 centimeters, 2 centimeters. And you're going to make like a diamond shape. Once you get that diamond shape, you're going to twist again for another centimeter, or 7 centimeters. And then you're going to form another diamond shape for the pelvis. And it's going to be the same size. 2 centimeters and then 2 centimeters. And at the tips of the corners of this diamond shape, that's where your the fox's legs are going to attach. So the rest of the wire you're going to twist all the way down. And then I like to measure around like between 10 and 12 centimeters for the for the tail length. So we're going to grab one wire, we're going to fold that in half, and you're going to make a loop at the middle point. It's going to be about a 1 centimeter loop, and then you're going to twist up until you get to 14 centimeters, and that includes the loop. So you're going to twist up 13 centimeters, and that's going to be the front leg. So you're going to do 2 of them. Repeat the process. And then once you get the 2 front at the size you need, you're going to do the 2 back. And it's the same thing. You're going to make a little loop about 1 centimeter wide. You're going to twist up, but for 14 centimeters. So it will be a total length of 15 centimeters. And that's going to be your back legs. Don't cut off the excess wire. You're going to use the excess wire to attach it to those diamond shapes. So I checked to make sure that both of them are the same length. And then I'm going to start to attach. Don't mind my cat. This is Snoopy. Okay, so I'm gonna start, and I apologize for being a little bit off camera, but I'm gonna start taking the two pieces of wire, and right at the tip of that diamond shape, I'm just gonna weave each one in and out and around that diamond shape and onto the body so that it attaches and it's secure. So I've found that if you start with one on the outside of the diamond shape and then start with the other end on the inside, and then you kind of wrap them around in opposite directions, it allows the legs to be a lot more secure. So you're going to do this to your two back legs and then your two front legs. So once you get all of your legs twisted, just make sure the body is in, a normal position, the head straight, the spine straight, and all of the legs are facing the proper way. And then we're going to start bending the legs so that it'll be able to stand up on its own. So we're going to do the front legs, and what you're going to do is, actually we're going to do the back legs. Sorry. We're going to bend. The first bend is going to be 4.5 centimeters. The second one is going to bend backwards 4.5 centimeters. Then you're going to do a slight bend downwards, 3 centimeters, and then another slight bend downwards, 3 centimeters. So mimic that on the other side, and then the front, you're going to bend to the left 3 centimeters, down 5 centimeters, and then towards the front slightly and down 2 centimeters. And if it's too hard to follow with the video, if you look at your instructions, I have them all listed out. So you can see the direction you want to go as well. At this time, I snipped the length of the tail to 12 centimeters, and I'm going to start wrapping the core wool around the frame of the body. So I'm going to avoid adding any core wool to the neck and the legs as well as the tail. I'm just going to try to build up the body shape as best that I can with using only the core wool. And you're going to do this by wrapping very tight and very consistently. So don't let the roving twist and turn. Don't let it make little lumps and bumps. And it'll be just so much easier once you start putting color on. The smoother your core wool is and your foundation, your base is on your felt, the easier it is to add color to it. And if it's not felted firmly, like tennis ball firm, you're going to have issues with getting details onto it later. You're going to you end up stabbing a lot more than you need to. So if you wrap it tightly enough and you get majority of your base to work with you, then it's really just like smooth sailing from then. So once you get majority of the body built, you're going to want to focus more on certain areas like the belly region, then and instead of continue to wrap around, because you don't want it to become like a sausage like shape. So what I do is I kind of roll up the wool, and then I take that wad of wool and then I'll use another piece of wool to then wrap it around so it holds it tight and I don't have to stab as much. And then I'll then, stab it in place. Anything that, the wrapping portion didn't get. So I do this layer by layer. You want to go slow and not add on too much wool at one time so that it doesn't get too large. And then you want to, every time you do add wool, you want to stop, look at the form, and make sure you're actually adding wool to the places that you need to, and you're not going too large and it's not starting to get out of proportion. So the tool that I'm using, that has the pink handle, it's my jabber tool that I use. I do sell them, but it's essentially just 3 needles put together by moldable plastic. And you can just create and mold the plastic using heat. And then I just attach, they pretty much just hold all of those needles together. And so it's more like a multi-tool, but the needles are all in one straight line. So it's really easy to control. Okay, so I am about to start adding color on top of my core wool, and we're going to grab the brown. We're no longer going to use core wool, so you can put that aside. And what I'm going to start doing is I'm going to start covering all of the core wool, plus I'm going to use that brown wool to cover the legs. And if you see here, I used glue just to keep that wool secure. And I'm going from the bottom of the foot to the top. And what you're going to start to do with the brown wool is you're going to start making those structural forms, the muscular forms on the legs and the tail, and then we're gonna end up starting to do the neck and the head out of the brown wool. When I'm wrapping the wool around the legs and I get down to the base, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create that almost triangular muscle, like shoulder muscle that they have. So what I do is I wrap the wool around the leg and then I bring it back towards the spine of the animal and then I felt it down. But I don't felt it to the body. I felt it only to the body, like I only felt it where it's up towards the spine so that there's like a little wing, um, kind of like the armpit area. It's not attached to the chest. It's completely separate. So once you do this and cover all of the core, you get all of your legs done. Then you'll start on the head and the neck. So we have covered all of the core wool. We're going to start to go up the neck and then create the head. So I just felted in the little tail end. I'm going to wrap it around the neck area, and then what I'm going to do is just start wrapping around to create girth. I'm going to felt in when it's needed, when like the wool starts to slip. And then what you're going to try to do is at the tip of that wire, you're going to create a ball. And I do this by wrapping and then stabbing, wrapping and then stabbing until I get the width of the head that I want. So you don't want to add too much wool at one time. What you want to do is add small layers, thin layers at a time, because you want to felt them down as much as possible. So the head of the fox should be very firm, a lot more firm than the body or the legs or any other part, because this is where you're going to put in the most detail, and you don't want that detail to become swallowed up when you're trying to put on these tiny little eyeballs, the tiny little lines in the nose, the highlights in the fur. So you want to, if you can tell, I'm stabbing a lot more than I did when I was doing the body. I'm wrapping almost every wrap. I'm going to stab for a little bit longer. And I'm going to continue to do that layer by layer until I get the width of that ball that I need. So we got the head form the size we want, and now what we're going to do is we're going to grab some wool and we're going to roll it up into a cone shape, felt it firm, and then we're going to add that as the snout onto the head we just created. So again, we want to felt this very firm, and what I did was I kind of just leave a little tail of wisp at the end of, wool at the end, and I'm going to use that to help me attach it to the head. So once I have the snout done, what I start to do is I just start to form the eye sockets, and that brow region above the eye sockets, as well as how the snout and the eyes meet. So you're going to do this all with the needle, all with felting, and this will help you later on when you need to add color, as well as when you need to add the glass eyes in. It just gives you kind of like visual guidelines of where everything's going to be placed. And you can see here, this is where I used my needle to create eye sockets. So what I'm doing now is I'm grabbing small pieces of wool and I am starting to create the eyebrows, the eyebrow ridge on top of where the eye sockets I had just made. And I'm doing this slowly by adding tiny bits of wool, until I get the shapes to be similar on both sides. So I've decided to add in black wool to just color in those eye sockets. So it gives it, you know, just a little bit more depth before I add the glass eyes in. We're going to start to create the nose. What I do is I grab a piece of wool and I just create a tiny little knot so it keeps it firm. And I'm just going to roll that knot into a ball and I'm going to stab it firm and start stabbing it to create the shape of the nose. And then once I get that firm enough and the shape that I want it to be, then I'm going to attach that onto the nose, onto the end of the snout. And you can see I left a little tail as well because that's going to be that line that creates that lip split in the front, right under the nose. And then it just helps attach that nose better onto the end of the snout. So at this time I'm going to start adding the white wool. So I put down the brown and the black. We didn't add the eyes yet. We will do that at a later time. And I'm going to grab pieces of white wool and I'm going to start putting them in like the belly area, the places on the core wool that I didn't add the brown wool, that will be white wool, under the chin, on the cheeks, to the end of the snout, all the way down on the inside of the neck or the front portion of the neck. And then we're going to end the tail with white as well. You should do several layers of white. I believe I did 3 layers because when you start to create that fur texture, you want to pull out only white. So you want to have a deep enough layer where when you do use the fluffer tool or a reverse needle, that you're not either pulling out the brown wool or too much of that core wool. So now that the underside and is all white, I'm going to take my brown wool and I'm going to just start wrapping it around the tail. I'm going to create as much girth as I can with the brown wool, with the exception of the end of the tail, which I will make. I'll wrap it with white wool. You can use the glue as much as you need to be able to get that wool as tightly wrapped as possible. So I felt everything firm, and then I'm going to transition to the black wool and we'll start creating and wrapping the legs of the fox. So you're going to take very, very thin strips of your black wool. And when I mean thin, I mean like you're going to try to go as close to maybe like a medium weight yarn. Um, and you want to keep the roving as flat as possible. So you don't want it to twist, so that you don't get this weird texture, bumpy texture on the leg, because the leg's going to be fairly thin compared to how you wrapped. So you're going to get like kind of like a tapered um, appearance from the top of that leg to down to the paw, and the paw is then going to start to taper back out. And something that I would recommend is maybe having like a damp washcloth or towel beside you, because once you start getting this glue on your fingers, you're going to need to take the glue off your fingers, or once you start doing or handling more of the wool, it'll become pretty hilarious and unmanageable with just how much fiber is going to end up sticking to you. So the cleaner your fingers are, the easier it is to work with the fiber. So now that all of our legs are the same, they're all similar size, similar shape, and all the paws are similar size and similar shape, we're going to start to add the eyes. So if you get your glass eyes, and what you're going to do is you're going to take your needle, or if you have an awl, it's a lot easier, but sometimes I can't ever find my awl, so I take the needle and I'll push it all the way through. So be careful of your hand whenever the needle does go all the way through. I try to get the thickest part of the needle through, and then I'll use that to make the hole. I'll put glue on the back of the glass eye, and then I'll just stick it into the hole. And for me, the Elmer's glue keeps the glass eyes in, just as well as, any of the craft glues. So as I stated before, I add white to the end of the tail. This time I wanted to see if adding white to the entire tail would kind of make the tail be a little bit more realistic, have a little bit more of a blend. So I ended up adding white all the way up the tail, and then I'm going to add orange just on the on top of the white. So here I started to wrap the orange all the way around the tail. And then you'll see I'll go back and I'll fix it, and I'll only add the orange to just the top portion of that tail, and I'll keep the bottom of the tail white. You'll see once I realize I'll unwrap, and then I'll just only add orange to that top. So our next step is to just start coloring the rest of the body with that orange wool. And you want this wool to be, it doesn't have to be completely firm, like very solid, but you want to make sure it's firm enough that when you stick a reverse needle in, that whole orange top layer isn't going to just pop out with it. So it does need to be put inside, felted inside of that brown wool, just as much as, I mean, not nearly as firm as the brown wool into the core wool, but it has to be able to be stable enough so that you don't pull it all out with that reverse needle. So now that we covered all of the brown wool with orange wool, what we're going to start to do is make the ears. So I take the black roving and I'm just going to add its width. I'm going to just start felting it and kind of making like a pre-felt. And then I have the shape of the ear illustrated in the instructions, and what I do is I just use that shape to just help me make sure I'm in proportion once I start shaping this thin piece of black, essentially pre-felt. If you have one of those brush mats, those work the best at keeping or making flat shapes instead of a foam mat. I don't have my brush mat with me, so I decided to just use the foam mat. You just got to make sure you pick it up so that you don't felt straight into the foam. And what I do is I just take a little bit of orange wool and I kind of make like a little tail so it's easier to add it to the head. And then when you take a tiny bit of white wool, it's going to be very, very thin piece. I cut it in half and then I just take a very small amount and I'll just felt it into the outer edges of that ear shape. And I'll do both of them, both ears this way. Once you complete both ears, I take a flat iron, I have a hair straightener, and I kind of just flatten the ears up a bit more, and it makes them extremely flat and so much nicer looking because it just really cinches down all of those fibers. And here's the end result. So before I added the ears onto the fox, I kind of just used my flat iron and created a little seam in the middle so that they have that domed appearance. And I just kind of hold it up to the place that I want, and I just do little tacks so that it at least holds the ear in shape until I can figure out where I should best place the ear. And I could easily rip it off if I wanted to. So I do that to both ears, and I make sure it's in the position that I want. And then once I find that position, then I'll start to firmly felt in the ears. now that the ears are in place, I'm going to start doing the detailing around the eyes. And this is how you know if your firmness passes the test, is if you're able to put a very thin amount of black wool around the eye and it doesn't disappear. Like the head doesn't eat it. It doesn't just shrink into the form. It should still lay on top of the orange wool or whatever wool you have on top. Okay, so we're ready to start creating the fur. You're going to take your fluffer tool out, and it has a little sheath on it. You're going to remove that sheath, and then you can just try in a random area to see how it feels. And as you see, it starts pulling up and creating like a fur-like texture. But what I like doing is I like starting from the bottom, because at the bottom, like the belly or the end of the tail, that can take a little bit more of a beating than, let's say, the back fur or the head, because the moving around and trying to get the fur pulled out once you've already, done the fur on the back. If you were to do the fur on the back first and then have to lay it on its back to be able to do the fur on its belly, then the fur on the back would get a little jostled and matted, and you might have to refluff it. So I decided to do the tail first, and I'm going to work the whole tail until and up through the belly, and then I'll start doing the back. But I normally work from the back of the animal to the head of the animal. When you start using the fluffer tool, you'll notice that a lot of the wool will kind of like shed out, or you'll actually just like pull out. And what I use is I'm actually using like a clover tool that is, it's kind of like a rake brush combo. And I use that to comb out the fur, and whatever gets caught in my little rake brush, I'll just pull it off and put it to the side. I also use like an eyebrow brush for smaller places like maybe the legs or the face, and that's how I'll kind of, put the fur in the direction that I want, or kind of just do the grooming portion once I use the fluffer to create the fur. So as you can see, it's really cool to, just to watch it develop and how you can see how the first layer of brown, once you use that fluffer tool, it starts to blend into that orange and it makes it look a little bit more realistic in color for the fox. And then once you get the fluffer everywhere, I take just like little sewing needles and I'll just start to groom. So around the snout, you don't want such long fur, such long fibers to be out. So I cut them pretty short. Around the ears, you just do a little grooming session around the eyebrows, anywhere that the fur shouldn't be as long as it is on maybe the back. You just cut them. But there we go. This is the fox, and I hope my horrible video tutorial helped you out. Ta-da!